And today we're on Unit 3, Lesson 7, and it's Interpret Political Cartoons and Propaganda. Mostly what we're looking at, we're going to look into propaganda a little bit more, I think, here down the road. But for now, mostly, looking at political cartoons and what they mean and why we see them in print. So let's take a look here. Oh, and everything opened up for me this time. Okay, yeah, so by the time we complete the lesson today, you're going to be able to interpret a political cartoon, and we're going to gain firsthand knowledge of how people feel about political events. Look at the audio, give us a little more detail on how that works.
Political cartoons are drawings that are intended to make political or social statements. These cartoons communicate the opinions of the artists who draw them. These individuals, known as political cartoonists, often use their editorial skills and humor or satire to make their points. Political cartoonists may also use a caricature, or an exaggerated representation of a thing or a person's physical features, to present a point of view. By interpreting political cartoons, you can gain valuable first-hand knowledge of the different ways that people viewed historical events during the time in which they were happening. As with other areas of the GED test, the skill of interpreting political cartoons will test your ability to interpret information at various depth of knowledge levels through the use of complex reading skills and thinking skills.
So in decades past, it was much more common to see political cartoons in newspapers. That's where you're going to find them largely. You'll see them a lot more in today's world on like social media. You go through Twitter or Facebook or something, you'll see political cartoons quite a bit. But the idea there is it's editorializing. A political cartoonist is it's all it's opinion. Of whatever situation or whatever political figure or whatever they're drawing about, and it usually tries to do so through humor, and historians really like political cartoons. You can flip through a lot of history books and you're going to find the reprinted political cartoons in them and things like that, because it like the editorializing, it gives you additional insight into how people feel about a particular historical event or a historical figure. It's just like looking at a newspaper article or anything else that is very specific to the time and about how people are feeling about things. So historically, they're really important primary sources, right? It happens at that time, so it's something that we can reference to see how people felt about things. Okay, so let's take a look at some here. So here we have this one. Unfortunately, with the screen and everything, hopefully if you guys got this on your screen, sometimes it's a little difficult to see all the detail. So I might try to zoom in a little bit here and see if that helps. But it says we're talking about prohibition again, just like we mentioned yesterday. So the Prohibition Party, which was a political party formed in the mid-1800s and campaigned for several years to outlaw the production, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages. It is the oldest minor U.S. political party still in existence. So there are still people part of the Prohibition Party today. From time to time, it has nominated candidates for state and local office in nearly every state. And what we have here in the cartoon, the woodman who's wielding the axe there, and if you could see, the axe says boat, so it's representing the boat. The woodman is representing sort of the American citizen. And we have the tree that says saloon down here. So where it's saying here in the text box is symbols such as the axe blade for vote, chopping into the tree, the saloon, often help convey meaning in political cartoons. So political cartoons will, a political cartoonist will often name things, like they'll have something like that where they'll put information on whatever item that they're working with, whatever action is taking place, they'll give some more description, just like the tree here says saloon and the axe says boat. And then B at the bottom, it shows that captions that may appear below a cartoon help clarify the cartoon's meaning. And off in the corner here is a politician. He's back up here in the corner. And that's him speaking in the bottom, saying, "Woodman, spare that tree, touch not a single bough. In youth, it sheltered me, and I'll protect it now." So basically what's happening here is that the American citizen is going to enact prohibition with their vote. That's sort of the main political idea. So the vote is cutting down the saloons, right? They're going to destroy the saloons. And so C, our text box here says political cartoons often include labels. That's what we're talking about, to help you identify, the people or the idea that's in the cartoon. So the woodman is labeled Prohibition Party. That's that little tag right here that's kind of hard to see. So that says Prohibition Party. And the man running is labeled politician. And that's, it's kind of hard to see back there. But right here on his hat, it says politician. And that helps you discern, the actors in the cartoon. And he's the one that's saying, hey, woodman, don't cut down that tree. So it's basically saying that the politician is not necessarily behind the idea of prohibition, and to some degree that they've been protecting, saloons and the sale and production of alcohol. All right. So let's take a look at our quiz. Here we go, on to lesson 7 quiz. And there's our cartoon again. And here, talking about making assumptions. So political cartoons express editorial commentary or opinion. As you examine the words, pictures, or symbols in political cartoons, consider how these items express the artist's point of view. And that's what this is all about, is that particular artist, that political cartoonist's opinion. And you have to take a good look at them sometimes to really take it all in, because there's a lot going on in some of these from time to time. All right. So let's take a look here at our first question. Tracy, would you read our first question for us?
Yes. Which of the following do the depictions of the two features in the cartoon suggest about the cartoonist viewpoint on prohibition? A. The cartoonist believes that politicians are rightfully concerned about prohibition. B. The cartoonist believes that the Prohibition Party is right in trying to outlaw alcohol. C. The cartoonist fears that the Prohibition Party is pursuing their goal recklessly. D. The cartoonist suggests that many politicians support the work of the Prohibition Party. B.
B, yeah, B is a boy, right? The cartoonist believes that the Prohibition Party is right in trying to outlaw alcohol. You could really tell that, that the way the woodman is in the foreground, that he's definitely taking a moral stance here. And that's, again, also how they draw the figures, right? That's something to take into account here. You have the chubby little politician in the background, right? And you have this sort of, strong woodman in the foreground with his, Prohibition Party label. So you get a sense there about the political cartoonist and what he is favoring. And certainly in this idea that he believes that the Prohibition Party is right in trying to outlaw alcohol. So B as in boy for number 1. Okay, Christiana, you want to read the first paragraph for us?
Okay, the first paragraph. Following the stock market crash of 1929, President Herbert Hoover sought to minimize the effect of the crash on the economy of the United States. American farmers were earning much less than before, and they could not pay their mortgages and bills. Without these payments, rural banks failed. After 1932, drought condition plagued the Midwest, adding the existing agricultural problems. Industries failed and factories and stores closed. Between 1920 and 1933, 5,000 Americans banks collapsed. 1 in 4 farms went into foreclosure. And an average of 100,000 jobs vanished each week. By 1932, more than 12 million Americans were unemployed. Part of President Hoover's plan to improve the nation's economy involved working with businesses and labor leaders.
So yeah, the Great Depression was just a whole series of events that one thing led to another, and part of that was the issues with farming, but because once people couldn't buy the farm goods, right, or they were slowing down, then farmers had trouble making loan payments, and then without the loan payments, banks were failing, right, because they were getting the money and the interest on the farmers, so the banks were collapsing, and then it just kind of snowballs from there. And on top of that, just problems in industry and everything else. And then what it mentions there, that 1932, the drought conditions called the Dust Bowl across the Midwest, and there was just a huge drought and there was a lack of rain. So on top of already having a difficult time selling your goods, there was finally there was a point where you couldn't grow. A lot of the Midwest was too dry at that point. So it was just a whole slew of economic problems during the Great Depression. And our little political cartoon here is Herbert Hoover, who's working on the Great Depression and trying to fix things. One thing to point out here, well, we'll get to that. I think there's a question on that. So let's go with Grace. Could you read question 2 for us?
All right. Which of the following statements best describes the cartoon's depiction of President Hoover? A, he is shown as a weak and ineffective leader. B, he is shown as guiding the country's economic back to stability. C, he is shown as unsure of the correct course of action to improve the economy. And D, he is shown as a wary of supporting big business during this crisis. Is it B?
Yeah, B. So he's shown here, right? He's working on it, and literally, right, guiding the economy, right? He's putting up a detour sign, so we're moving in a new route, in a new way. So that's showing you, you know, we're switching directions. We're avoiding something here. So, Etta, could you read number 3 for us?
Which of the following does the cartoonist identify as the cause of the economic crash? A, President Hoover, B, labor, C, speculation, or D, detours from regular business practices? C.
Yeah, C, speculation. Yeah, this is what I wanted to mention. So, you know, generally speaking, speculation is sort of an educated guess on the future or forecasting, and it's a part of investing. It's part of the stock market. And so in the 20s, you know, when we talked about yesterday, like things were really, you know, happening, right? There was a lot of innovation in business and manufacturing, and just generally, you know, after World War I, you know, there were some good times. So you know, the economy had been soaring; it had been going really well, and so a lot of your investors, a lot of people that worked on Wall Street, were speculating on the stock market, and you know, but it wasn't necessarily based on real growth. It was based on wishful thinking, and they kept just pumping money into the stock market. And it's like just this belief that it was never going to go down, that the stock market was just going to keep going up, 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 and up, and it was driving up, you know, prices. But it was, you know, wasn't based in necessarily real growth, which is often a problem in investing. And, you know, like I said, speculation still occurs. It's a part of investing, but it can get out of hand. I don't know if you guys might remember hearing something about GameStop last year and their stock prices getting driven up. So there's a bunch of sort of like hobbyist investors who just picked GameStop, and it was like, okay, we're going to start buying GameStop stock, and they artificially inflated the price. Like they drove it up really, really high. And it, you know, was driving like, you know, investors and everything crazy because there's a whole other side of it, and it gets real complicated. But it's kind of what was happening in the stock market, just generally speaking. Everybody was putting a bunch of money into it. Well, there was like a little hiccup in March of 1929 where it started to drop, and people kind of like, okay, maybe it doesn't always just keep going up. And then by October, we started seeing some decline, and that scared all the investors, so they started selling everything. And once they started selling everything, that's when you had the crash. Once everybody started taking their money back out, trying to sell, you know, so they didn't take a big loss or tried to get as, you know, what little gain they could. You know, all of that selling off all at one time caused a crash. And of course, we've seen those several times, but the one in 1929 was one of the worst. So what the cartoon there is pointing out, you know, speculation street. Hoover's trying to route people away from speculating with some, you know, moderate regulation and things like that. But it wasn't until Roosevelt came along that we got a little more strict regulation on investing in the stock market, Wall Street. All right. So let's see here. Tracy, you want to read our paragraph for us?
Yes.
Roosevelt?
Yeah. In February 1937, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt proposed legislation that could increase the number of U.S. Supreme Court trustees from 9 to 15 for each justice over the age of 70, a total of 6 at this time. He would be empowered to appoint a new justice. This has altered a course that had struck down some of his proposed New Deal program. After 6 months of hearing and debate in Congress, the president's plan failed.
All
The
right.
question:
Yeah, go ahead and read the question.
how does the artist characterize President Roosevelt's demeanor in this political cartoon? A. Hopeful. B. Angry. C. Somewhat sad and dismayed. D. Cold and calculating. What? C.
Yeah, he's looking sad and dismayed, right? And again, we're showing, just we could see FDR, the cartoonist has made sure that he's identified Roosevelt in the cartoon, and he's looking kind of sad and dismayed there. And so what they're talking about, this is actually relevant right now, because there's concern from the Republican side that Joe Biden is going to try to pack the courts. And the idea of court packing is expanding the court by adding additional Supreme Court justices. So right now, the court leans conservative, which is exactly what was going on during Roosevelt's time, right? These judges had been appointed over the last few decades by Republican presidents like Coolidge and Hoover, and so when things went to the Supreme Court for them to rule on, like things in the New Deal program, they were coming back and saying, well, this is unconstitutional. You can't do this, you can't do that. And so, Roosevelt thought that was really holding up his plans for the New Deal. He was getting things through, but not everything that he wanted. So there was an idea, it's like, okay, we're going to expand the court to 15 justices. And, that means he would have got to add 6. So he would have appointed 6 of his own Supreme Court justices. That way, skewing it more back towards a liberal Supreme Court, and then he would likely get things passed that he wanted to get passed. And that's what they're, concerned about with Joe Biden right now, is that he may try to expand the Supreme Court because we have a right-leaning court at the moment. It's unlikely. And it's more talk than anything, but it took about 6 months, and that's what this cartoon is representing here in the calendars. And the cartoonist is basically stating, it's like, this was a waste. Roosevelt wasted 6 months of, time, effort, energy, trying to expand the court. And, that's kind of what it's representing here. The little title underneath says, "Oh, death, oh, change, oh, time," 1937. Okay, and then our final question here. Let's see, Christiana, you want to read this question for us?
Okay, number
5. Yep.
Number 5. Why does the cartoonist show passage from, or is it pages? Yeah,
Pages, yeah.
From the calendar with wings attached? A. 6 months time was wasted while Congress considered the president's proposed plan. B. The 6 justices who were 70 years old had passed away. C. The wings represent the fleeting nature of service on the U.S. Supreme Court. D. The page and wings represent President Roosevelt's strained relationship with Congress.
A.
Is it A?
Yeah, it's A. 6 months time was wasted. And this cartoon, you can't really, it's not necessarily that the cartoonist doesn't like FDR. or Roosevelt. It's specifically pointing out that he thinks he wasted time where he may have been able to do something else instead. And holding up Congress, because things had to go through Congress to try to get, additional Supreme Court justices and all this. So it was kind of wasting everybody's time is what he's pointing out. Yeah, so A for number 5, and that's our quiz. So 1 was B as in boy, 2 was B as in boy, 3 was C as in cat, 4 C as in cat, and 5 was A. Okay. So let's submit our answers here. Yep, should be all green. There we go. Okay, and let's move on to some more cartoons here on our workbook. So again, it's saying interpreting a political cartoon calls for a close study of the various elements in order to determine how the cartoonist creates a message through images and text. The artist will editorialize or express his or her opinion on a newsworthy or controversial issue. One way in which political cartoons convey their ideas to readers is through the use of caricature. A caricature exaggerates or distorts the characteristics of someone or something in order to make a comment or editorialize upon it. Political cartoonists can or also use symbols and visual details to convey meaning. So caricature, like with the woodman and the politician, right? The way they're portrayed are very different. Their proportions and the stout little politician, right? And how he's dressed, and as opposed to sort of what is represented as the everyman, right? Is the Prohibition Party with his axe. So let's take a look here at our workbook. Okay, and yeah, so we have the Philanthropist cartoon here. So philanthropy is the sort of the act of charitable giving. Like in that day and age, you had guys like Andrew Carnegie, who was this, probably the richest man in the world at the time. And if you go to like Western Pennsylvania, if you go to Pittsburgh, you'll see, it seems like half of Pittsburgh is named after Carnegie because of the money he donated, like Carnegie Mellon University or the Carnegie Science Museum, Carnegie Art Museum, all this stuff. So, and like Bill Gates today is considered a philanthropist because he's given away, a good deal of his wealth, although he's still, still really, really rich, but he's, donated a lot of his money to different charities, and there's like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, stuff like that. So here what we see, and like it says, always make sure you take a look at the title, because that's going to tip you off to what's going on and help you interpret the meaning. And then B, it says political cartoonists do not typically depict situations in a realistic fashion. Look for the ways in which the images in a cartoon are distorted or exaggerated. Consider what purpose the cartoonist might have for using these exaggerations and distortions. So what's happening here is this unemployed man in the background is selling apples. Help the unemployed, apples 5 cents, and the philanthropist is buying the apples to help him. So it's somewhat positive idea here that there's philanthropy going on and there's people that are trying to help the unemployed. And you see all the apple cores where he's bought a bunch of apples and he's trying to eat them to help the unemployed. All right. And so here it says, in this cartoon, the man eating apples has a top hat and a cane. The other man wears an old hat and coat. Based on clothing, you can infer that the man eating apples is rich and the other man is poor, right? So the man eating here with his little top hat and everything is the philanthropist and his little walking cane and everything. And then the other gentleman you see is the one that's most likely unemployed. So those kind of exaggerations and caricatures will help you identify what's going on in the cartoon. Grace, you want to read question 1 for us?
Okay. Which of the following elements in this cartoon could be considered a caricature? A, the sign. B, the man standing beside the light pole. C, the man eating the apples. And D, the apple calls. C?
Yeah, C,
Is it-
man eating the apple cores, right? Or I'm sorry, the man eating the apples, not the apple cores. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about, right? You know, philanthropists probably aren't always walking around with their little top hat and their cane and everything, but that's going to help you. That little bit of exaggeration helps you to see, you know, the difference between the individuals in the cartoon. So C, the man eating the apples for number 1. Okay, Etta, you want to take number 2 for us?
Okay, it says, what statement is the cartoonist making about the Depression? A, it caused unemployment to increase. B, it caused the price of food in the nation to increase. C, it affected people in urban areas more than in rural areas. Or D, it affected the wealthy as well as the poor. C?
So D, because I mean, it did affect everybody kind of the same, but yeah, what's kind of making the case here is that there was efforts by the wealthy to, help the unemployed, but at the same time, people were losing their fortunes. So it was difficult for everybody. Of course, it's relative, right? It's always relative. To lose, half your wealth when you're, a billionaire is certainly, not nearly going to put you in strife the way, it will if you make $30,000 a year. But at the same time, that means that those wealthy are having to cut back on who they employ. They don't have money for charitable, organizations and things like that. So it does hit everybody. It may not be life-threatening to the wealthy, but it does impact them. So yes, D for number 2. And 3, we're going to have a little drop-down paragraph here, I think, in the bottom. So our cartoon here, we'll zoom back out a little bit so I can put that all in, or best as I can anyway. So what we have here, right, is New Deal to the rescue. And FDR again, right, we have him depicted with his little hat, and he's playing a role of the doctor. Congress is the nurse there, and Uncle Sam sitting here as our patient. See all the empty bottles of remedies, and FDR is carrying his little case with more remedies to try to fix the economy after the Great Depression. So they say, of course, we may have to change remedies if we don't get results. Basically meaning that he's going to have a whole bag full, right? There's all kinds of things that he can try. There's things that they're going to be able to do to try to help fix the economy. Okay, so let's read through here. So it says this political cartoon presents one cartoonist viewpoint on President Roosevelt's New Deal programs. President Roosevelt, FDR, is shown as blank. How is he depicted? As a member of Congress, as a nurse, a businessman, or a doctor?
A doctor?
Yep, he's got his little bag there, right? So he's the doctor. The doctor trying to cure the sick man, sitting in the chair. The sick man is who? The New Deal, the Constitution, the United States, or Congress?
C.
C, yeah, the United States. Yep, the whole country, right? And you can see here, right, the little stars and stripes. Well, it's the stars on his pants underneath his little robe there, or his coat. So that's, gives you an indication that's supposed to be the U.S. There are several medicine bottles arrayed on the table. The initials on the medicine bottles represent what? New Deal programs, members of Congress, popular medicines, or failed U.S. banks.
A, New Deal.
Yep, New Deal programs, right? And there was a whole bunch of them. Like CCC, we talked about the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was one of the more successful ones that employed a lot of young men. And we're going to have a poster about that here in a minute, I think. So New Deal programs that are meant to cure the sick man. You can infer that the artist's attitude about the New Deal is generally extremely negative, indifferent, cautiously positive, or supportive.
C,
Yeah, C, cautiously positive. So there we go. There's our answers. Doctor for the first one, the United States, New Deal programs, and cautiously positive. And you kind of get that, right? It's not particularly negative. The other way you can tell that is the way FDR is depicted, right? He looks healthy, and you can see in his eyes and everything that he looks optimistic, and he's basically saying, it's like, well, we can keep trying. We're going to have lots of things that we can try here. So number 4, we have a new cartoon here. So Tracy, you want to read question 4 for us?
Yes, question. In this cartoon, which of the following is the figure holding the card supposed to represent? A, Herbert Hoover, B, Woodrow Wilson, C, the United States, D, the United States. With the following.
Yep, D, the United States. Yeah, and the one giveaway there, right, is the stars, which is kind of hard to see, but you see on
its sleeves.
Yeah, and it's holding up a bunch of sort of ideas that are going to help, right? So you have to maybe know a little bit about poker in this, how to play cards, right? Because he's got 4 aces, right? Which is going to be a really good hand. That's going to be a winning hand in most cases if you're playing poker. And on each one of those is like one of the different types of programs or regulations that's being taken on by the New Deal, like the budget message, the bank holidays, protection of gold, inaugural address. These are all things that are going to help FDR. And then bank legislation is the king there that he's holding. So yeah, so D, the United States, number 4. And number 5, Christiana, you want to read number 5? She might be away. Let's try Grace. Grace, you want to take number 5?
All right. The cartoon uses the images and text together to convey which of the following types of feeling? A, optimism. B, skepticism. C, confusion. And D, calmness. Is it B or A?
A, optimism, right? Yeah, so this one, again, is showing it's not a negative political cartoon. It's much more of a positive political cartoon. Yeah, so A for number 5. And yeah, so here we have a new poster, basically. So it's similar to political cartoons. Political posters and advertisements are created by artists to editorialize or express messages or beliefs. These posters may sometimes be used as propaganda, which is something designed to promote a particular idea or doctrine. So here's a little bit about propaganda towards the end of our workbook here. This poster promotes one of the New Deal's most popular programs, the Civilian Conservation Corps, known as the CCC. It provided labor-intensive work for the unemployed. So yeah, this would have been sort of commissioned, by probably, like it says here, the Illinois Emergency Relief Commission. So they probably asked an artist to make up this poster. And, propaganda always has sort of a negative connotation to it, right? When we think of propaganda as something being, very biased and trying to get you to believe something particular. But, it's also just simply sort of advertising. And of course, when the government's behind it, of course, it is trying to, sway your opinion, or sort of indoctrinate you into some idea. And here, we have this young man's opportunity in the Civilian Conservation Corps. He's smiling with his little axe there for workplace, study, and health. And you're going to achieve all of that by signing up with the CCC. So our question then, where are we on? We're number 6. Etta, you want to read number 6 for us?
Which of the following best describes the way the artist depicts the young civilian conservation corps worker on this poster? A, angry, B, proud, C, courteous, or D, exhausted? Looks kind of proud.
Yeah, B. He's definitely proud, right? B as in boy there. So yeah, he's, smiling, he's happy. He's working. So yeah, and again, we have our poster. Tracy, you want to read the next question for us here, number 7?
Yes. What was the program feature in this poster most likely designed to confront? A, bank failure, B, political corruption, C, outbreak of disease, D, unemployment. I don't know.
I think D.
D?
Yeah. D you
D
put in
as in
there
dog.
too in the chat. D, unemployment, right? That was the idea behind it, getting people to work. It also was giving them job training and job skills. So, especially for young men, in the middle of the Great Depression who, couldn't get work and didn't have job skills. This was a way that they could, actually earn a paycheck, and it actually, develop different types of skills. So, it was all about combating unemployment. So D for number 7. And we got our poster again. Christiana, you want to read number 8 for us? I think she's still MIA.
I will. You want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
What was most likely the reason the poster had a positive propagandist message? A, there were too many applicants. B, the jobs were highly desirable. C, the jobs were very difficult. Or D, the wages were very good. Well, looking at the picture says a young man's opportunity for workplace, study, and health. Applicants taken by a commission. So B.
It's C. The jobs were really
Very
difficult. This is one of those. It's kind of like, it's a little vague, right? Because he's happy, But it's also they were.
He's holding the hammer, or what is that in his hand?
It's I think it's an axe, maybe. It's an axe or like a sledgehammer.
That shows that it's a hard job for the people.
Right, and this is where you also have to reference the text. So towards the end here it says labor-intensive work for the unemployed. So yeah, it's one of those. It's kind of like, it doesn't really. You don't really jump to that when you see the poster and the idea, but yeah, it's about the jobs were difficult. So they're trying to help sell the jobs too. And you do that with a smiling guy who's wielding an axe. All right. New poster. So now we're jumping to World War II. And again, more of the idea of sort of propaganda. So the idea here, help bring them back to you. And it has, find time. We'll get into it after we talk about the poster a little bit. So find time for war work, raise and share food, walk and carry packages, conserve everything you have, save 10% in war bonds. When we go to war in our world today, we're not asked as just as American citizens or Americans to do much, right? Our connection to the military today is usually if we have somebody, we have a family member that serves. That's how it's visible to us, or we might see somebody in uniform when we're out, stuff like that. But at that time, when we were building up for World War II, which was such a massive effort, and I've mentioned this before, this idea of total war, where your citizenry is part of the war machine. It's part of the war making effort. And we had this huge buildup. Women were going to work in factories because the men were fighting, and that's where you get the idea of Rosie the Riveter. We've probably seen the poster of the woman with her, hair back and her overalls on and her rivet gun. And part of the propaganda, behind the government was to make that connection between the people at home and the fighting men and women. And there was also going to be shortages, and we needed to, by the way, daylight savings time, something that we still do. That was an effort from World War II. They calculated how much energy we were going to need to produce wartime goods. And one of the methods they instituted to save energy was daylight savings time. So we don't need it anymore, but in World War II, it was an effort to help save electricity. And all these sort of ideas come from that. So that's what I was talking about here. Find time for war work. How can you volunteer for the war effort? Raise and share food. There could be shortages. There was something called the Victory Garden that you're supposed to grow, right? That was going to help win the war by you growing your own vegetables to allow, the agricultural industry help supply our soldiers. Walk and carry packages. Don't get in your car to take that down to the post office. Walk. I don't know. It's not probably as used as much as it was in decades past, but the idea of a Sunday driver, which my mom always talked about when we get behind somebody that was driving too slow. I was like, Sunday driver, because they would pick a day of the week to do all of their errands and not waste fuel. And so that kind of became the idea. You get all your Sunday drivers out on the road on Sunday that are, going to do all their stuff. And, just conserve and donate what you can. Buy war bonds, which is going to help the war effort too. That helps fund the war effort. So all that is rolled into the idea in the poster here. And of course, I'm going on because I read a really good book about it at one point. Okay, so anyway, that's the idea here. Number 9, Fatia, I heard you commenting there. You want to read number 9 for us?
Yes. Based on the information presented in the poster, which is the best description of a victory home? A, it is one that flies the American flag. B, it is a home in which several residents own war bonds. C, it is a home that displays a victory sticker in the window. D, it is a home that finds multiple ways to support the war effort. I think it's D as a dog.
There you go. Yeah, it's going to be all of those things, right? We have several points in here that are being made. So D is in dog for number 9. Number 10. Tracy, you want to read number 10?
Yes, which of the measures listed on the poster is aimed directly at preventing shortage of gas online? A, finding the time to work for the world. B, raising the share food. C, working and carry package. D, conserving everything you have. C?
Yep, C, which I think we could all use some extra steps, you know. Yeah, so walking and carrying packages. There's posters specifically, you know, targeting these individual ideas, like, you know, carpooling. You know, if you're going somewhere, make sure you have a full carload. And they get really intense, like, you know, do you want your soldier fighting your war to die? Then carpool. Yeah, it's really crazy stuff. I might try to see if I can find some good ones to put on Google Classroom with this today. All right, 11. Let's see, Grace, you want to read 11 for us?
All right. From the information on the poster, what might one conclude about the impact of war on society? A, most people were eagerly working to support the war. B, the war was consuming many critical resources and causing shortage. C, the war provided a good way to invest money. And D, the war was isolated to the military and their families. Is it C or B?
B. Yeah, B is in boy, right? It was a lot of materials used. There's posters about, you know, saving on tires, don't buy extra tires, you know, all kinds of stuff like that, because the, you know, the need of for rubber in war making and manufacturing and everything else. So it's I mean, there's just tons of different types of political cartoons and propaganda posters and stuff for World War II. We're going to actually find a couple. I think we're going to look at another one here in a minute. So here, number 12, it says the US Constitution does not specify the number of terms a president can serve. But George Washington had set the precedent that presidents hold office only for 2 terms. However, Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected president 4 times, from 1932, 1936, 1940, and 1944. In response to FDR's 4 terms, Republicans were able to push an amendment through Congress in 1947, limiting a president to only 2 terms. It was ratified at as the 22nd Amendment in 1951. So yeah, there was never any legislation. It was just, hey, you know, once Washington had served 2 terms, that kind of had been the tradition. If you served 2 terms, you know, you would retire after that. But FDR was like, I want to keep going. And he'd probably still be getting elected. Well, no, he died. So shortly after he was elected in 44, after his inauguration, I think he only lived about another month, I think, of that last presidency before Truman took over after his death. So either way, you know, probably for good reason, we have that legislation now with this. And of course, in our poster, then we have FDR, and we can kind of see what's going on here, right? He's holding up the Constitution and he's Xing it out, canceled by FDR. And of course, we see him being depicted as a king, right? And that was something that was always just a bad idea. It's a bad taste in the United States to have the idea of a king, royalty. That was something that we was not going to have after we defeated Britain in the Revolutionary War. So for number 12, Etta, you want to read number 12 for us?
Okay. Why does the cartoonist portray President Roosevelt as a king? A, he believes presidents should wear robes to command more respect for the office. B, he believes President Roosevelt is acting like a king because of his desire to stay in office for a third term. C, he wants the United States to become a monarchy. Or D, he is mocking the monarchy of America's British allies. Is it B?
Yeah, it's B. Right. It's just the idea, if you're going to keep getting reelected, how are you different than a monarch who, serves for a lifetime? And that's, the idea. And of course here, we see FDR kind of depicted in a negative way, right? That's the idea behind the robes and the crown and everything. So, and that the perfect idea, what we're talking about as far as the sort of having your finger on the pulse of the country at the time. Now, of course, he was reelected, so he was very popular, but there was also, concern about, how long can this go? Either way, there's a little bit of concern. And of course, it was ratified. So there were certainly Democrats as well that were a little bit concerned about this, because it can always flip back the other way, right? You get to, somebody like Dwight Eisenhower as a Republican president. If, we don't put in some legislation now, maybe he wants to run for a third or a fourth reelection. So, those things work both ways. So you have to be careful about, what you, how you feel about something like, a fourth term for a president, because it could flip back and burn you. All right, and then number 13, Fatia, you want to read 13 for us?
Yes. Question. Which of the following can be inferred as the reason a Republican-controlled Congress supported the 22nd Amendment? A, they wanted to make sure that all future presidents had a last 2 terms. B, they were eager to satisfy a public that wanted to place term limits on the president. They were following President Roosevelt's wish to be the only 4-term president. They wanted to ensure that no other Democrat could win election more than 2 times. So I will take A or D.
It's a D. D is in dog.
D.
Yeah. Because again, here's your kind of context clue, right? At that time, it was a Republican-controlled Congress. So, of course, it was easier to get the 22nd Amendment passed because you had, you had Republicans in control of the legislative branch. So, that's kind of your context clue. Republican-controlled Congress. So, of course, they would be interested in not having a Democrat serve more than 2 times. And this is exactly what I was talking about, right? As a Democrat at that time, you might be like, well, no, everything's cool. We can reelect, FDR for a 5th term, but that could always switch, right? And if you get a Republican president in there, what's going to stop him from running for a 3rd or 4th term? So in the end, it's a really common sense, reasonable, rational legislative act. I think everybody can agree 2 terms for a president is more than enough. So yeah, D as in dog for 13. And so our last cartoon here. After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in late 1941, the United States was propelled into World War II. So for almost the next 4 years, Americans fought in Europe against Nazi Germany and its allies and against Japan in the Pacific. So you might be able to make out the name on this cartoon, but anybody recognize that art style? Anybody know who drew that cartoon?
Nazi.
No,
Nazi.
it's down here in the corner. If you look close, you might be able to make out the name.
Oh, but Dr. I cannot read it.
It's Dr. Seuss. Yeah, Dr. Seuss, right? One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, and all those books. He was a propagandist during World War II. He made a lot of political cartoons in support of the American war effort. Some of them very questionable as far as his depictions of Asians and things like that. You will look at him today, you're like, that's a little rough. But here's an example of one. He did a bunch. That was a lot of artists at the time. A lot of popular artists and illustrators were commissioned to make political cartoons for the government and posters and things like that. And he was one of them. So yeah, we have the Nazis here caged up, and they're getting pulled along by the U.S. here. So Tracy, you want to read that question for us? Question 14.
Yes. Which of the following does the animal in the cage represent? A, the United States, B, Nazi Germany and its allies, C, people who resist serving in the military during World War II, D, the lands Japanese control in the Pacific. B.
Yeah, B, right? It's the specifically with the swastika there, we know it's supposed to be Nazi Germany. But just more generally speaking, we're thinking about Germany and its allies. So we're trying to cage the beast there. And of course, the idea behind it, right? Cages cost money. If we're going to lock these guys up, buy more U.S. savings bonds and stamps. That's how you're going to make your support effort. Donald Duck made and Mickey Mouse made cartoons about buying war bonds. There's just Warner Brothers. There's Warner Brothers cartoons about the war effort and everything. You can go look up and that again shows what type of effort was put behind it. Not only were they trying to connect with all the American citizens, but we had Hollywood that was involved. All these movie studios. We had artists, cartoonists. Everybody was putting forth something for the war effort. And then 15, Grace, you want to read 15 for us?
Okay. Well, according to the cartoon, which of the following will occur by buying savings bonds and stamps? A, allow the building of more zoos. B, make millions of dollars for people who buy bonds and stamps. Help American soldiers win the war. And D, help the United States and Germany become friendly toward each other. Is it D or B?
It's C. It's C as in cat. Yeah, helping American soldiers win the war. Generally speaking, that was the idea behind a lot of it. Trying to connect the citizen with the effort of the soldier, and that's always who you were helping. That was what they were trying to sell the American people. Buy a war bond, help a soldier. Don't drive your car, help a soldier. All that. Grow a garden, help a soldier. That was always the connection that they tried to make. Okay, it's 16, our last one. Etta, you want to read 16 for us?
Okay, it says, according to the cartoon, in which of the following roles is the United States best represented? A, as Uncle Sam the zookeeper, keeping the dangerous Nazi animals from doing harm. B, as a smiling duck-like bird carrying a rifle. C, as a zookeeper trying to raise money for more cages. Or D, as a large dinosaur-like animal being carted about in a cage. United States. So I'm thinking it's the bird that's pulling it.
Duck-like bird.
Yeah.
That was my first guess too when I looked at it, but it's actually A. So again, it's kind of hard to tell, but if you look at his hat, he's got the stars and stripes on his hat. And he is carrying a rifle, you know, and he is duck-like, but that is supposed to be representing, you know, the Uncle Sam, right? It's the United States as the zookeeper, and he's, you know, keeping the dangerous Nazis at bay and caged for us. So yeah, A for 16. All right. So actually, let me submit that real quick. Oop, well, never mind. I'll have to go back. So let me stop sharing, or let me stop recording.